and welcome to another episode of the Laid Back Life podcast, where we're talking about how to love entrepreneurship and improve daily through the concept of having a great life. Last week, super cool. We had Chelsea Williams on talking about the money numbers for a great life. We're going to audible today in a very hard audible because it's going to go into Josh's great disclaimer. So we are not talking about money. Today's episode is not about money. There is nothing in this that you should consider about money. Instead, we are talking about basically how to have a podcast in a way that helps you live a great life and market. Josh, thank you for being with me.
Jordan, it's great to connect with you, man. So many great conversations, so many great interviews together, and even some candy store visits with our kids. It's been great.
It's true. All right. So definitively, we're not going to talk about money because, disclaimer, the content shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as financial, legal, or tax advice. Definitely from Josh, especially from me on the legal side. The views and opinions expressed are those of our guest, Josh Wilson, and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any agency or organization. Josh is a licensed real estate broker and a registered investment banking representative, but this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice. We strongly recommend that you consult with a qualified financial advisor, legal counsel, and tax professional before making any financial decisions or taking any action based on the information provided in this podcast. Dun, dun, dun.
Boom. You made that disclaimer actually sound cool.
It is.
I might use your recording to introduce me before I walk into a room or something like that.
Sold.
Say, before you guys do anything after I talk, listen to my friend Jordan. Go for it, you know?
Yeah. I'm a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. Don't take anything I say as legal advice either, even though I can. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Please, this is two dudes across the internet talking about how we met each other through a podcast and how we have used podcasts to grow our business. That's it.
That's it.
That's the podcast. We're done. What
All
more
right.
do we need?
See you guys. See you in
Yeah.
the next episode.
No. So here's what I want to know. How did you get into this? How did you get the podcasting side, not the licensed real estate broker and registered investment banking representative?
Yeah, all of it was absolute trial and error, trying to figure things out. I was building a fitness technology company called The Village Push. You could still see some of my videos, how to do a straight arm plank. I left it up there so people can see me back in the day doing exercises.
How long did you straight arm plank for?
I don't remember the longest, but for the video, it was just, maybe a minute. Not
Maybe a minute. Okay. That means the longest is like 8 minutes.
Listen, I
we're
was
getting
shredded
serious.
back then. That was I only had one kid and I was pretty shredded. I've got some extra weight since then. But I was building this fitness technology and my thought was I could go out there and create marketing material, like use our fitness stuff rather than theirs, or I could interview my clients, share their story, learn from them. So it was kind of like customer research and marketing kind of wrapped into one. And I was in my garage in Dallas, Texas, where it was pretty hot. And I was recording. Back in the day, you had to use a headset with Skype and then have an external recorder recording your conversation. And that's how I got into podcasting.
How long ago was this?
2015, maybe.
Okay, so we're talking almost 10 years. By the time anybody listens to this, we'll be talking 10 years.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Because
Long time
now
ago.
I have a joke, but it's true. What do you call two white dudes talking to each other?
Podcast.
A podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and we are two white dudes talking to each other on a podcast.
Yeah.
It's my favorite podcast joke. Not that I know any other podcast jokes, but that one
That's
gets
a
me
good
every
one.
time.
It's a good one. How do you know if someone's listening and if they're not watching the video, they're like, how did you know Josh was white? It could have been
How did I
anything
know?
else. You're watching the video, but
Oh, it's for
then they
them.
go, oh yeah, we know. Yeah. Anyways,
Because we're on a podcast, I guess.
we're on a podcast. So, and I met you
On a podcast.
on a podcast. Yeah, we reached out to you and we did the first interview. This was maybe before you sold some of your stuff, and we started chatting and we went back and forth, interview volley, and it's been fun. And we've introduced each other to a bunch of people. It's been a great podcasting journey between you and me.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to recreate that journey for more people.
Oh, cool.
Now that we don't need a headset and Skype and an external recorder, like literally everybody, we are on Zoom Zoom is recording all this. This is going to go to my video editor. Like we have made it. I have a automated system that lets people book. Josh booked this, filled out the information with that wonderful disclaimer.
Mhm.
Like we can make this process so much easier than you were doing it 10 years ago in a way where I think almost everyone should have a podcast.
Yeah, it sucked back in the day.
Yeah.
It's getting so much easier now. It's
But
easy.
so who should not have a podcast?
Mm. Who should not have a podcast?
Yes.
Um, I think if someone is, this may go against some rational thinking, but if someone is super introverted and the idea of interviewing other people or spending that much time with them, like really robs their joy. Like, I don't care what kind of business you have. If you really don't want to do this, then you probably shouldn't do that. I like to focus on things that bring me joy, make me money, and add value. So, who shouldn't do this? If you don't want to do it, I don't care what textbook says you should do it. Don't do it if you're going to hate every minute of it. Because the truth of the matter is, you're going to do one episode and quit. So,
Yes.
that's who should not do it. If you don't want to do it, don't do it.
And I want to be clear. It's not that everyone who's introverted doesn't want to do it. Because like my wife is as introverted as I am extroverted. We will go to an event and I will be like, oh, I talked to so many people in this. My wife will be like, I talked to one person. We are now best friends.
True.
They're Benji's godmother now, and we are gonna hang out tomorrow and we are besties. So like it is not necessarily the introverted extroverted, but I 1,000% agree. Like if you hate talking to other human beings and it terrifies you and whatever, then yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. Or my son always goes, or, right? Or if you just do your own episodes where you're just talking about, Jode NAS or I don't know, some technical, lingo, and you just, hit record and talk to yourself, sometimes that works too. But that's what I think, man. I think who should have a podcast interview is someone who, for me, B2B, business to business or business to investor, it just makes sense, man. You can spend time with people, get to know them, build relationships, build trust. They could see you. Body language is important. I mean, you just get to spend so much time with people and build great relationships. So that's who I think should have it.
Well, but even in B2C, if you are getting cases from referrals, if you are getting cases from other people, like even in that situation, like I can bring on my referral sources. Like I'm a B2C law firm owner, they're a B2C law firm owner, but we will build the content together, similar to like bringing on another business owner to try to sell them services.
Sure. But that wouldn't you consider that B2B since you're doing a business to business referral? You're
Well, but
interviewing other broker or attorneys
correct,
and then referring
but even
business.
if our firms are B2C, like I am selling to consumers, but I'm getting
Yeah.
referrals from other businesses, so we could even you could even B2B2C have a podcast.
That's fair. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, I didn't think of
What?
that.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, dude, that's what I do. I mean, I guess that when I
Brilliant.
had a marketing company, I sold to other businesses, but
Yeah.
um so in the 10-year window of you doing podcasts, going from super complicated to easy, what has been the best technological advancement in
Oh
making the process easier?
gosh. Well, one was the decision and one was technology. One of the
Ooh.
decisions that I had early on, like, man, I was doing so much work, custom thumbnails, custom show notes, all of this stuff. And then like I just stopped doing it one day. I just would record it and let it rip. I didn't do any edits. I just like record, paste, the audio track and then paste the video and said peace. And I didn't see any dips in my metrics. And I was like, huh, I was doing all that work for 1,000 episodes or so. So one of the greatest advancements was in my mindset going, this doesn't matter. I didn't have the staff, I didn't have the people to do it. So I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. Then AI came on, and then I could take the audio file, drop it into an AI program. It transcribes it. It creates show notes. It creates titles. It can create thumbnails if I ever want to do that. And it does like 90% of the heavy lifting that used to suck the joy out of it for me. That was a game changer. Because then we tried to do 500 interviews in 1 year, and I was able to do 3 or 4 a day without worrying about all that crap work in the back end.
Totally. And is that, I don't, you guys, you sell that service? You have a spreadsheet that you sell to people or give to people with the rundown of the programs?
I used to. Now we only focus on strategic partners that we want to, maybe do some deals with, whether in commercial real estate, mergers, acquisitions, or, taking companies public or post-public funding. Like if we're ever going to do, strategic stuff, then I'll open the kimono and show them our systems, our process. Here's the tech to use. Here's how to do that. Um, we're working with a lot of M&A advisors and business brokers, and we'll open the kimono and show them all the tools to use, all the processes, and we'll build it or build it for them.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So like I'm about 6 or 7 weeks, I'm doing a presentation at our local bar association on running a referral-based practice.
Nice.
And thank you. But it's funny because like I told some people and they're like, well, but you're gonna share your secrets with a bunch of them. And I was like, yeah. They're like, but aren't you concerned? I was like, no, no, no. I'm gonna be training like 100 other lawyers in the community to build relationships like I want them to be built. And so like they're going to be better to know more people, to know me, to like we can increase everybody's value by the more that we know and the more we know each other and the more we have these connections. So like from your standpoint, I think the more that you can get other people to build these connections through a podcast, the more beneficial they are as guests for you or you to be guests for them or the connection of the investor from that.
Yeah.
Nothing on here is reflected as Josh's actual opinion or that of any organization or entity.
Throw that. Good job. Uh, yeah, maybe. I spent, we spent a decade and, did thousands of interviews and built a ton of value for ourselves and for other people doing this. And it's been great. I think, there's nothing really new under the sun. I've created and I've shared it all. So if anybody really wants it, they could dig in and find it. Now, if they ask for time, which is the most precious thing, because
Yeah,
I'm not like you. I wish I were. You've built so many systems and process. You are like a master of building like the flow of things. I'm just not good at that. So like maybe with our powers combined, we can do that across the world. We could
there
conquer
we
the
go.
world through podcasts.
Yeah. Well, because it's like, look, here's my thing. What do I not like doing? And how can I get something else to do it? Sometimes it's automation. So like your example here. So I sent you a booking link. It had a form. It asked for like 8 questions. That went to my video editor who then filled in because like I can't have so last week's episode with Chelsea, and then we'll talk about next week's episode at the end. Filled in some of those other things. So like I show up with you 22 minutes ago or something.
Mhm.
I've got everything sitting here. It's all ready to go. I know you. I've got the bio with the disclaimer and whatnot in here. I've got our topics for us to talk about. Like, it was great. But to your point earlier about doing 500 in a year, like, this is what I would need to do 50 in a year, let alone
Yeah.
to do 100 in a year, let alone do 500. Like,
Yeah. Do you wear a different Hawaiian shirt for each interview?
I wear a different Hawaiian shirt every day until like it's clean and then I put it back on. So it's random chance.
Okay. Copy that. I understand.
So for those of you that can't see, I'm wearing a like bluish gray, yellowish red. When I wear this shirt, and I've got two other ones, because like these are my colors, people ask me like, do you change the background behind you to match the shirt? And I'm like, no, 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 like the background is my colors. So I am in color in a couple of the shirts.
Huh.
Hey all, I want to take a brief break from this episode of Laid Back Life to tell you about a really good opportunity that we have for all of you. So I'm going to be hiring a new executive assistant while my current executive assistant is still here. This is probably the first time I've been able to do this as seamlessly as it's going to happen this time. So I wanted to sell that opportunity to all of you so that you can have the opportunity to either have your EA trained or feel comfortable training an EA for you going forward. That's going to be $1,000. What you're going to get is our 50-page SOP, which you could work off of right there. A discussion about what we're looking for in this position, why the specific things that we want for my EA based upon me, our job posting from this, a series of interview questions, and then last but certainly not least, you'll have access to 2 different 2-hour trainings. You can come, you can have your assistant come, you can watch the trainings afterwards, and then 2 other 1-hour Ask Us Anything. So that would be me, my current EA, and the future EA. That'll be all for the month of February, and anybody who buys it, you'll have access to recordings going forward. If you buy it soon enough, you'll have access to show up with us live as those things happen. So that's going to be $1,000. If you're interested, you can click in the link that will be attached to this video, or just reach out and let me know, and we will add you to it. All right. And now back to this episode of the Laid Back Life podcast. All right. So here's my question. When it comes to somebody, we talked about who should have a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing is like, what does somebody need to do before they start the first episode?
If they're one of my strategic partners, we're going to spend a lot of time figuring out how the podcast or YouTube channel or media supports their business model. We're going to focus on how does this support your business model? We're not trying to create a new business model. We're not trying to let the podcast be the business model. The podcast should support something you're already doing and bring scale and reach to what you're already doing. So we're going to spend a lot of time focusing on that first, and then we're going to build out who is our ideal client. When we figure out who the ideal client is and how it supports the business model, we're going to wrap those all together, and we're going to create a show or a brand that your ideal client wants to come on your show. And then you've hit kind of like the sweet spot. When your ideal client is knocking on your door every day to hang out with you and be on your show, you won. Then you will do 500 episodes, because at that point it's how many conversations do you want to have with your ideal client? All of them, right? So I think people kind of do it backwards. They're like, oh, I have a show about real estate, so I should call it Real Estate Show. I had a show called The Real Estate Show. But at the end of the day, I wanted to get investors who wanted to invest in real estate to have a conversation with me, and then I'd go find them properties or deals or other financing deals, right? So that's what I think you should do before starting a show.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah. Name an industry, and then I'll give you an example based around whatever industry you share with me.
Not real estate broking or in registered investment banking?
Okay.
No,
All right.
no, I mean like, so you want me to go out of your wheelhouse?
Yeah. Anything, try to get it B2B. Any type of
B2B.
B2B
Okay.
business.
Business lawyers.
Okay. Business lawyers. Awesome. So a business lawyer, they get paid money by forming LLCs, by doing contracts, by doing acquisitions, by all these different types of corporate like paperwork. So wouldn't it be a good idea to build out a little network of other people who can refer you business? So one, you're going to interview your referral network. CPAs. A CPA is one of the first person who knows when a company might go for sale. So you interview them and you say, hey, before selling a business or whatever, and then wouldn't it be a great idea in your neighborhood? Let's just say you live in Orlando. Start a show focused on local Orlando and interview every business in your category. Like, I want to work with companies that are 10 million to 100 million. Go interview them. Hey, I'd like to highlight you on your show. What did you do to scale your business? How did you do it? What were some of the mistakes you made in the beginning, legal mistakes you made in the beginning? What would you have done differently? And then make them have a great time. And then they got to see you, maybe even bring a microphone into their office so you get to know where they work. They get to see you, see how your process is. So that's how I would do it. Network, referral network, and ideal clients. And between those two, you're going to start reaching into their second degree network to find out where those deals are coming from. Because it might not come from that business, but birds of a feather flock together. People building, $100 million businesses hang out with other $100 million businesses. So their friends are going to start seeing it. They're going to refer you. And that's how you build out that network.
Same show with those two groups?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'd also add a third in this specific example, other non-business lawyers, and then I would talk about the overlap. So like family lawyers, merging a business, splitting a business with a divorce, because so many people go to their lawyer and say, hey, do you also do this other area of law?
Yeah.
That would be my other channel that I'd add.
So good, because you guys could share referral fees, you could share business, you could share insights, you could build out your little SWAT team yeah, it's brilliant. Absolutely do that.
So my next question was going to be, so now that we've got this topic, and
Mhm.
then like figuring out the exact hardware specifics, I mean, dude, you could run it with an iPhone at this
Yeah,
point, and probably
for sure.
headphones would be my biggest thing. Any other like quick software for or hardware for day one?
I mean, look how easy this is now. iPhone just did an update where you can record your calls on iPhones now, and it will go automatically into your notes and it'll transcribe it. So you can have like the majority of the work already done just through a phone call. You could use, AirPods. I have the Apple Pro AirPod, whatever they're called, but like it's not bad audio quality. Now, if someone's listening on a $2,000 headset or in their, Rolls Royce, they might hear, wow, there's a lot of background noise or whatever. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter too much. Get into a decently quiet area and you could do it on your phone. Next level up, get a USB mic, ATR 2100, or or that one's 99 bucks, something like this. Shure MV7 is 250, and then use Zoom on whatever program you're using, Apple or Mac. So like that's the next level up. It's easy. It doesn't have to be complex.
The biggest thing I want to say about Zoom, because I use Zoom, you have to go in your settings. You want to record in speaker and gallery view or something like that, because in essence, then this way I have an audio feed that is Josh and I next to each other. I also have me talking. I also have him talking. And so like once you take that and go into like TikTok or Reels, you want the just speaker, whereas other times you might want the side by side.
Yeah, yeah, good point. You can, in the settings, if you record to your computer, you can choose multiple settings. So you could record in speaker, you could record in gallery, you could record separate audio tracks. So you can do those things. It's not overly complex, and it's 20 bucks a month or 16 bucks a month, right? And it's not bad. There's other things that are a little bit better. Like I met some guys who built some really good audio recording software that they're pretty big names now. Zoom's right there. It's not that bad. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. And then, so it's interesting because my next question was going to be like, how do you find people to talk to? But I think your earlier answer of, our three buckets, like you find those people in those buckets.
Yeah. Yeah. LinkedIn, since I'm mostly B2B, LinkedIn is pretty darn easy. And you could reach out to people all day long with cold calls. Hey, are you interested in doing X with your business or Y or whatever? Or you could say, hey, would you be open to being on a podcast show? Your conversion rates are going to be a lot better offering them a free seat on a podcast.
Gosh, you laugh. I, I listen, I am the most time focused person that I know. Can we do a 10-minute digital coffee chat about X? Absolutely not. You want to come on a podcast for 60 minutes and I'll tell you the same thing that I could have told you in 10 minutes? I am there. If
Yeah.
you are listening to this, if you send me a message, if you have a podcast, I'm not going to ask you how many people watch it. I'm not that smart. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's record it. We're in. I'm in.
Yeah. Could we talk about that question? So I think a lot of people getting a podcast. Do you mind if I ask you a question or we bring up a
So
subject?
okay, flip this. You're interviewing me now.
Just
Come
for a
on, Josh.
second. All right. Just for a second.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people's insecurities when they're starting a podcast show, because I've helped a lot of people do this, is they go, well, I don't have an audience, and they're going to ask me, how big is your audience? So I've had some big guests on my show, and one of the questions that comes up occasionally is they go, hey, yeah, I'd be interested in your podcast show. Tell me about your audience. How big? Where are they at? And what they're doing is they're measuring you and they're measuring their time going, is this worth it?
Yeah. I
Right.
agree.
So, one, I hate getting that message. I hate it when people ask me. Now, I have a few shows that are top 5% global popularity. I have 24,000 followers on LinkedIn. I've built some audiences, some decent audience. But when someone starts out with how big is your audience? They're measuring like, is this worth their time? Which is okay. But instead of asking me like, "Hey, why are you doing this?" or "What's your purpose doing this?" or like, "How can I help you?" Like it's like, "What am I going to get out of this guy? I'm going to get an extra 1,000 likes on my TikTok page or whatever." So for me, man, I don't like that question. Like, how do you approach that I mean, you always build great audiences wherever you go. How do you approach that question when someone asks you when you're building, a new show?
No one has ever asked me that question.
Nice.
But here's the thing, like, look, I you're gonna film content, right? Like if it is somebody who is so insta famous or whatnot, like they're filming content. So really it's a question of do they think that 30 minutes or 60 minutes of you asking them questions is going to be worse content than they would create without the questions? I am of the opinion that what I think I want to talk about means jack shit compared to what you think I want to talk about or what you think your listener wants me to talk about. So even if I took your questions and then refilm them again in a totally different setting to cut you completely out of it, I still think I'd be creating a better ideation of content than if I was just like, well, statistically speaking from the algorithm, people want to hear me talk more about a weekly planning, Like I don't think that's a thing. So then I'm like, well, if you're going to give me the raw footage and then I can edit the raw footage and then I've got the transcript and then I could
Mhm.
refilm, like how are you going to be wasting my time unless I have decided I'm no longer filming content, I'm done.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I I really enjoy the process of interviewing people. When you asked me, hey, could you come on my show? I was a little nervous, to be honest. I get nervous when I'm not in control. Every once in a while, I'd try to grab control again. But just letting you know, there is
As
a insecurity there.
as you were like, can I interview you? Here's my thing. I would rather be the interviewee.
Hmm.
So I'm in the opposite. Like I don't mind interviewing people at all. And ultimately, like I had you on. I'm excited to hear these answers to questions. I'm learning stuff. I'm looking at is my mic up to par to whatever else. Like there's opportunities there. But like I'm a lawyer. I was a prosecutor. They handed me 100 cases on my first day and were like 10 of these go to trial in 20 minutes. Go have fun. Like what's going to happen on an editable podcast? I've had one time where a guest was like, "Oh, I don't like how I look. Can we just use the audio?" And I was like, "Fine. No problem." Nope. And I was like, hey, can I cut up 3 clips? Like, can you approve these clips? The lighting was off, the whole thing, whatever. Like, we got that. Great. The rest of it, it lives audio only. I don't mind. I don't
Yeah,
care. I'm learning. I'm listening to your thing to ask you the next question to learn. You're asking me questions. I'm learning. Like, this is life, I
yeah.
think. I hope.
When you edit this, could you get rid of some of these gray hairs for which side? Yeah, this right there's some little
What
gray.
do you,
That's my dude,
dude?
man. Look at that
This
gray
is 200 bucks
wisdom.
an hour. Yeah, exactly. You raise your hourly rate with some gray hair.
There's
Uh,
wisdom in that beard.
All right, so I'm gonna take a pause for a second. So you're listening to this on Tuesday. This Friday, you'll get a newsletter from me if you're signed up. If not, now's a great time. This week's newsletter is what does an ideal year look like for you? We're in keeping with our whole run of me working on my next book, How to Love Your Life, and so this one is the 5 minute or so overview of what an ideal year looks like for you, with some tips and tricks to make that ideal year a thing. That being said, let's come back here. So we've got our overview, we've got our people, we've built the proper audience for them to come, or I would ask them, what audience do I need for you to come on the podcast? And then like, hey, you wanted 10,000 people, I'm at 9,500. Can I schedule now? We'll be at that number by the time you book. If they're really going to do that, I would call them on it. Um, Once we get to like right before the podcast, are you doing background research in them? Are you pulling a bio? Like what prep do you do before the episode itself?
Yeah, I used to do a lot more, and now just a little bit of time constraints. Sometimes I don't even know what the interview is that day, and I'll just show up. I'll look at their LinkedIn real quick. If I never met them before, and somehow, my PR firm or a group like put them through, before I hit record, you're in the green room, so you could spend a minute with them. And I go, what's one question you want me to make sure that I ask you? Because I want to make sure I bake that into today's interview. So now you find out their main motivation for jumping on. And then you always ask, telling you, if you guys have a podcast, please ask this question before hitting record. You go, what question am I not allowed to ask you? So that also shows you 2 things. One, I've interviewed CEOs of public traded companies and they said stuff and I had to go back and trash the whole episode. So I just wasted an hour of my life. but also it shows you what they want to stay away from, so you can make sure the podcast doesn't go there. Now you're looking out for them, and it's I think it's pretty thoughtful. Um, so you spend a few minutes and then you go, cool, I got it. You ready to rock and roll? And then you dive in. So, prep time, a lot of people will like that guy who does that hot things, the chicken wing
Yeah.
thing. He does a fantastical job at background. So he'll ask people questions and it blows them away. So you can definitely hire a private investigator for each person. But if you're doing 500 in a year, you kind of have to be able to jump on in a minute's notice and do an interview. So somewhere in between that.
I will say, so I was on a podcast just before I got Josh on here, and the host was like, "So you opened your firm in 2015. What is that?" And I was like, "I did not give you that information. Like you
Yeah.
found that, and it's a couple other things. Like we're so specific that I was just blown away by their prep work. That being said, I do almost no prep work, so I'm being a little hypocritical in this respect, but it does show when somebody goes that extra mile.
Yeah. You can do that now with AI. You can type in someone's name and you can say,
Yeah.
please do some. So that's one of a process that we would like to have developed. We're working on that. It's, hey, listen to these top last 10 interviews of this person. Find the interview, find out when they said good question or something of the related, and then formulate, some other questions around that. So you can have AI do a lot of this.
So to use, you said some of your favorite questions. I always like either what are you super proud of that you've accomplished recently, or what are you struggling with currently? It's really the same question, just in two different frames. That
Yeah.
gives me because that gives me the really like this is like we are launching this right now. We are doing this
Mhm.
right now. We are growing out this thing right now. I've got a book coming out and whatever. Like it gets them into that, pre common knowledge situation,
Yeah.
which I think then helps me frame better questions.
Yeah. Those are great. Yeah, I like saying, the on the negative side, like what frustrates you or what are you really struggling with right now? Because I think especially you'll get some people on a podcast show who are ego driven and they like being in the limelight, but if you ask them like what's bothering you, what you're struggling with, like they have to really contemplate because they didn't prepare that in their brain. So then they go and then they dig deep. And that's a good interviewer who asks those kind of questions. So yeah, nice work, man.
You ever read the book Who by Jeff Smart?
I might have listened to it. I
Okay.
have to
So
give me a synopsis.
if you haven't, it's about finding the right people to hire. The section on job interview questions is amazing because he's always like, we all ask this question, what's your biggest weakness? And then everybody has that bullshit answer of like, try too hard, I work too efficiently, whatever. And then he's like, if they do that, you have to turn back on them and be like, that doesn't sound like a weakness. And
Mm,
just keep doing it until they give you a real weakness. So like for those ego-driven people, I'm always like, oh, that's awesome, but that doesn't sound like a struggle. Where's the struggle? And then like, well, but yeah, like like that book has I use more for podcast questions than interview questions, because I think I have an easier time asking people to follow up in a way that makes them look good. Whereas with an interview, I'm just like, I'm gonna crush you right now, which is not the right mindset, but it's
yeah,
like that's how the book makes me feel.
that's great, man. I like that. So it's by Jeff Smart.
Yeah, Geoff, Jeff, though.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna check that out.
There we go.
Yeah, good book recommendation.
Thanks, man. 160 something every year for the last couple of years. You get some good ones here and there.
Nice.
We have our show, we have our buckets of people. We found somebody, we've researched them. We're in the moment. Like, are you hyping yourself up beforehand? Like, what do you
Oh, like the Matthew McConaughey thing in the
do
uh
you?
no.
Oh,
Uh
okay.
no.
You made it seem like that was the
Wouldn't that be
thing.
cool if I did that like routine? No, no, that's a lie. That's a good question. That is inaccurate. I do sometimes I have to change my attitude because I might be walking into it like I just got in a fight with the wife, or one of the kids came in, I had to wipe their butt or something right in the middle of a meeting, whatever the case may be, right? So I might not be walking into this with good energy. And I think that it's super important for a podcast host to walk into something with positive energy, optimism, and a good heart. It might have even been this morning that I had to I said a little prayer. I said, God, please let me show up well for this person. It wasn't for you. I didn't pray for you. I should. I will. But
Okay.
I was like, because
I'm not
I
offended.
didn't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
So I just had to change my attitude, change my heart, and I go, you're serving these people, show up well. And I tried to do my best. Or sometimes I have a pull-up bar over there. I'll do some like exercise or some jumping jacks, get the blood flowing. But yeah, I actually do prep myself up every once in a while.
There we go. And
Yeah.
that's like this to me, this goes back to your earlier thing. Like, if you're not going to look forward to this, don't do it. Because I'm like sitting here on my calendar and I'm like, I can't wait for 2:30. I can't wait for 2:30. I can't wait. I get to talk to people I like about
Yeah.
stuff I like. I get to ask them questions. I get to learn. Like, it's easy. It's easy for me. And I want to be very clear. Like, I
Yeah.
want it to be easy for you. I want you to look at this and be like, oh, I get this opportunity to do X, Y, and Z. Not, oh, I have to do another podcast.
Right. Right. Yeah. That that is such a an important thing to focus on. It's like what brings you joy? Like you have the laid back. I think I should wear a lei. You should wear a lei. We should wear leis on the laid back podcast. You know those things that go around the neck.
Yeah, that's the whole point. That's exactly why we have it as
Oh,
the name.
okay. Well, I got your brilliant marketing then. Yep.
Thank you. It's
Oh
spelled
man.
that way. But here's so what I want to do. Remember Pee-wee's Playhouse? They had the word of the day,
Yeah.
and then if anybody said the word, everyone was like, "Ah, I want."
Arr!
Yeah. So that's I. If anybody says the word "lay" on the podcast, I that was what I wanted to do. Cut to B-roll of the Pee-wee's Playhouse and everybody going wild. So you may be the first one who has done it.
Lei.
Yeah. Bingo.
There.
All right. So we're looking forward to the person. We're in the moment. Like, what else? What other advice, insight, wisdom do you have while the podcast is happening?
Yeah. So here's where a little bit of the art comes in, and this is going to be practice. What you do not want, this happened to me before, you do not want your guests to feel like they're trapped or that they're being sold to. I've been on a podcast show where someone's like, hey, could I interview you? And he starts doing a sales presentation, and I'm being recorded, and I'm going, man, this is awkward because I'm about to say no, but I need to do it in a super nice way because it's going to be posted on his YouTube and all this other stuff. So I'm like, I'm trapped. What it is a trap. And I don't like being trapped. So when you're interviewing someone who is your ideal client that you really want to work with, what I do is, in this little bit of an art form, I try to find out what's important to them. I try to find out how they like to work. What kind of people do they like to work with? Because they're qualifying me and I'm qualifying them. And I'm doing it in a friendly manner. I'm not putting them on the spot. And I might drop a clue. Like if I do like them, I go, man, I'd really like to work with you one day on a project like this, and then I'll just move on. I'm not hard selling. I just kind of plant that seed. And then a lot of times after we hit stop recording, they'll come back and they go, "Man, that was fun. We should do a deal together." And I go, "Man, I'd love that. I already have your phone number. I already have your email address. We've already spent time together. I've already asked you the questions on the podcast show about what kind of deals you like and don't like and how you go about saying it. Like, do you mind if I just send a few your way?" And the answer is, I phrase it this way: would you be open if I come across one of those deals if I send it to you? 99% of the time they say yes.
See, I think you should be more specific.
Okay, go for it.
Look, what is good sales? Like ultimately, you can spend millions of dollars getting sales training. What does it really boil down to?
People know, like, and trust you, and you have influence to make a decision.
So you are listening to what they're telling you and then turning it into how you can provide what they're looking for, right?
Mhm.
So in a podcast, hey man, what are the kind of deals that you want to do? For me, what changes are you trying to make in your life? What would a good coach look like for you? What are the things that what do you need other people to do to make sure that you are effective and stay in your zone of genius? Now I have those answers, and it's not in a way of like, so now hire me, but like I should know what you are looking for from these questions in a way that is helpful to anybody listening and watching, but especially to me. So now the follow-up is like, oh, hey, you want a coach who's going to call you on this stuff? great. Like you want, you're looking to make this change. I just had a client last week. That's what we've been working on with them, whatnot. And then, to your point about like, I'd love to do a deal with you. I like to do like the labeling. I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I want my clients to think. That's exactly the mindset I want my clients to have. That's exactly, like put them when it's true. 100, like this is not a manipulation.
Yeah.
This is genuine honesty for it. So like from the sales thing coming out of this, I'm just like, so you check a bunch of boxes, you got to feel me, like I know, like let's make this happen, man. So for you, like I would be more like, are you open to me sending you this? Like, hey, look, I think I have a pretty good view of what you want. I think we had a really good vibe with each other. I want to send you some deals. I want to send some deals your way when I think they make sense for you.
I don't think anybody's going to say no to that.
Like, and if they do, okay, great. And then I would be like, can you do me a favor? Why? Like, what's the issue? What's the hesitation? Some like I want to know. And then if they're like, oh well, I need to know somebody for 6 months. I've had coaching people be like, I need to see your I want to see your tax returns. I was like, okay, cool.
Really?
Like, yeah, like that's the thing. All right.
That I like that. They're measuring if you're going to coach me financially, I want to know that you've done it financially. Interesting.
I mean, my perspective is I think that's kind of a BS measure, but that's a separate issue for I would rather you track my heart rate and see if I enjoy life or if I'm overly stressed or whatever. Like,
Hmm.
page somebody 4 times a day and have them write if they're happy. Like that's what I would rather do. But we don't normally do those things. We do,
Yeah.
however, compete against the government for tax purposes or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in the meeting, we're going through, we're having great meetings.
Yeah.
Anything you want to highlight on like the wrap up of a call?
I always give people an opportunity to highlight what's important to them, and you could do it two ways. You could say, "Hey, what are you working on that's really cool?" or "Where could people find you?" You can do something like that. I I kind of take this approach and I go, "Hey man, I know there's something I probably should have asked you that I screwed up and did not ask you. Like during this interview, like what question do you wish I would have interviewed you or asked you on this interview?" And then they'll say, "Man, I wish you would have asked me." And then they will say, because in their
Yeah.
mind they're thinking, ask me this. How do I wrap? And then you give them that spot, and it's just like this release. And then you go, "Cool, man, go for it." And then they have that time to like stand on their soapbox or just let rip. Those typically become really good clips.
Yeah. Well, it's funny to me because like for at the beginning of doing a podcast, I always like to give them a softball question somewhere.
Mhm.
Then like I swear to you, I what you said. Then I'm like, what's the softball you want in essence? Like that's the question. That's what your question leads to. Like, what did I miss?
Mhm.
Because they're not going to be like, oh, you missed this really complicated question that I don't have a good answer for.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the square root of three? Like, yeah, they're going to say something of what they feel like they're an expert in, or they could add value to, or something that's really important to them. Yeah.
Put a pin in this because I'm going to ask you this question, but I have other questions that I know I want to ask before I ask you what I forgot to ask you or what else I should ask you.
Okay.
What do you do with the podcast afterwards?
Ooh, depends. Typically, we, put it into our AI software, do the show notes, do all the kind of like the bundling, set it for schedule, hit publish, share it on LinkedIn, tag them, let them know that it's live. We'll then go back into our clip generator where we'll post the video and then it creates a bunch of clips and then we'll review some that try to make sense and that look cool or that we think will get some good traction on. Your actual long form interview might not get a ton of views, but if you chop it up into shorts, each short might get 500 to 1,000 views. So you could 10x the view count per episode by creating shorts. So we typically do that, and then on the deal side, we'll put them into hopefully we put them into the CRM. Well, we put the notes in there to know what they're looking for and how they look for that. You could just copy and paste the transcription and and then go do deals. Find the deals that work for them. Find people that they need to connect with. Find value that you could bring them. The after the interviews where the real value is.
So to our introverts,
Hmm.
my biggest advice, and correct me if I'm wrong or throw in yours, is like just focus on the conversation with the person who's in front of you while the conversation is happening.
Hmm.
Like this is no offense to 8 billion people on the internet who might be watching this or not at some point. This is Josh and Jordan talking one on one, same as we would at lunch, same as we would hanging out, whatever. And then, you can loop people in from there. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. Now, I don't have a lot of experience being introverted. Like I typically am energized by people, but
Yeah.
my wife and one of my kids is pretty introverted. So like for them, this would not be fun. This would be torturous. But they do have opinions. They would like to talk about it, but um, I think that they would do well in a one-on-one, maybe not even video. So maybe it's just audio. Maybe the video would intimidate them a little bit, and they'd be open to giving a comment, something like that.
But see, potentially,
Yeah.
I've talked to so many estate planning attorneys,
Oh
and
yeah.
they're like, I hate doing the webinar. I hate the me up on stage presenting to 40 people. It's like, but do you do consultations? Like, oh yeah, I love it. It's just, it's me and the family. It's one on one. I'm like, great. There's your podcast. Your podcast is you and them one on one. Like, forget everybody else. You don't need to be looking at 40, 40 different screens on gallery view. You don't need to be standing up on stage at a Ruth's Chris while everybody has a fillet. Like, just make it about the person. And like, that was the thing that
Yeah.
changed their opinion, got the mindset going, got them to do it. I don't know. That's what I have found.
But if they
But
do one of those on stage at Ruth Chris or Mark's Prime or something like that, they can invite you and I, and we would be happy to partake with them in
and
the
then give them
podcast
feedback.
interview, and we'll get the steak.
Yeah, there we go. I'll give you feedback for a steak.
Yeah, me too. I like steak.
There we go. Anything else afterwards?
I've had people send me gifts, like a really cool sweater. I've had people send me handwritten notes. Um, Usually it's in my heart to do a handwritten note or some type of thank you message. I've been dropping the ball on that lately, but I like some type of follow-up that says thank you for your time. Time is the most valuable thing that people have, their time, energy, effort, their like who they are, their essence, and how they show up to the world. So I want to do a better job at that. But that's where I'm lacking is the systems of stuff, the process of things, because I go fast.
Yeah. Well, so along those lines, like my thing is I want to be a good guest. I mean, I want to be a good host, but like I really want to be a good guest because if I'm the host, it's my podcast. If
Hmm.
I'm the guest, it's your podcast.
Yep.
And so like I'm always like, hey, what can I do to be a good guest? And so then like I basically made a drip campaign for my guests. That I'm like, hey, your show's coming up next month. We already have some, or next week, we already have some clips. You want to share them? That's great. All right, your show's live. It'd be great if you shared it. Write a review, like going through this. Let's get more eyeballs on your episode. And some people follow it and some people don't. But I feel like by doing that, um, listen, if you come on as a guest and you don't want to share anything, I'm totally fine with that. Like I'm not bringing you on to squeeze you for every ounce of eyeballs, but I want to make sure that you like I have so many moments where I'm sitting here like I want to do more for so and so, but I don't know how. They're not letting me. I don't know what they need. So I want to try to remove that issue for other givers.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever taken the Working Genius assessment?
I have.
What are
I
you? You're
broke
you're
it.
a GE, aren't you?
No.
What are you?
I am a DGT. I broke it. They're like, everybody's two. And I was like, I'm three. So in essence, I have none of my own. So for anybody, this is the Working Genius from the Table Group, Patrick Lencioni. It
Mhm.
spells out widget. So like I am not at the beginning. I consume as much content as possible to get my wonder and to get my ideas. I discern what makes sense for me or for my firm or for my company. I galvanize my team around to do it. I don't want to manage them. I want to make sure it's done at the end. So I am a discern, galvanize tenacity, and I am terrible on wonder, identify, and enablement.
Mm.
And so when I hire people, I normally hire ETs. That's what I want you to enable and tenacity yourself.
I've got a guy for you for that.
Okay, there we go. I love personality tests,
Me too.
everybody.
Yeah.
So I am so glad that we had that. Yeah, and I think it's 25 bucks. Or last time I took it, it's 25 bucks. It's a good thing to put people through. It will tell you a lot about not necessarily what they're good at. It's really about what gives you energy and sucks your energy. If
Hmm.
I have to manage you, my energy is sucked. If I have to come up with the idea, my energy is sucked. If I am talking us up and figuring out what to do and making sure it's done, I could go all day.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so true. And usually, unless it's just weird, usually if someone finds joy in something, they'll get pretty good at it.
Yes. Oh, correct. I mean, listen, I'm 5'7". I'm probably not going to be able to dunk. But short of like physical attribute stuff, you get better by reps. Like that's the thing. The people that are great violinists are because they played the violin a bunch correctly. It's not just time, but it's time well spent. So the more you love it, the more you become a student in the game, the better you do, the easier it is to get the reps, the yada yada yada.
Yeah. Yada yada yada. What do you think you're the best at? Like you talk about like violin and basketball. Like, is there like a tactical thing? Like I should have asked you this. You're good at Legos.
No, that's my wife and kid. I'm
Oh.
like, why did I spend $200 to put the toy together myself?
And you're
I
gonna
don't get it.
step on it in the middle of the night and you're gonna cuss out your
Yeah.
whole family? Yeah, I
But
get it.
my wife and my 6 year old are like, we love Legos. Buy us Legos. We will put them together for you. So my this is actually like the first real Lego set my kid put together like 2 years ago at 4 was the Thanos gauntlet.
Yeah, it's pretty
Um,
awesome.
to answer your question, I think I'm the best at simplifying things,
Mm.
which is basically the coaching I do with my clients is to simplify their life and simplify their work into a way where it makes sense. Because my wife will tell you every time I am a work with another business. Like if I bought, what did I buy recently? Black Friday. I don't know. Oh, I had to book a doctor's appointment recently, and I was like, I'm gonna send the doctor a 4 page rundown of how much easier he could make the process of working with him and see if he cares. And like that's just how my brain works.
Yeah. Did would they value that?
It's next Tuesday, so we'll find out.
Okay. Do it in the middle of the exam, like he's whatever kind of exam you're getting. You're like, hey, by the way, I got this PowerPoint presentation for you.
I- I'm not gonna do that.
Colonoscopy.
And when we, yeah, right, there we go. Close. I'll tell you after we stop the recording, but
Okay,
I'm not
cool.
gonna do that during the situation. So.
Yeah.
All right. Now, there was a really wise man who came on and said, you should ask people what question you didn't ask.
Mm.
So, what question did I not ask in terms of how to have a podcast to help you run a great business, live a great life, have a lot of fun?
Yeah. The find out the parts of the process that you don't like to do and weigh whether you do it or not. That part of the process. So like, man, you're really good at having conversations, but you're not good at video editing. You're not good at this. You don't have good lights. You don't have all that other stuff. Like, what is the bare minimum thing that you need to have a podcast show? And really, it's your phone. And you could record the conversation. You could be with someone in a Starbucks, you could hit record on a voice memo sitting in between you, and that could be your podcast. You could pay for the basic hosting. There's free podcast hosts. You could do it for free. I mean, you're probably spending a couple $100 a month for your cell phone, whatever. But what I would say, what question should you have asked is like, what is the absolute bare necessity? And I think it's sharing stories of people.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing you could do is share people's testimonies because we could learn and grow from each other. And hopefully, wisdom is gaining experience from other people's screw ups. So, wisdom, is captured that way. So, the only way we're going to learn and grow is if we share our screw ups.
And if they're like so people of New York, right? Like there's a thing they just go around like interviewing people on the street. So if your podcast really is you at a different Starbucks or something like that, I'm imagining more people tuning in to see like what the if they could hear the person behind you talking about how they're, a disruptor in some industry at the Starbucks for 12 hours a day. Like I would be interested to see how the things that you think are lo-fi actually make more people interested. Like if you did this on a street corner downtown and
Yeah.
just like all of the background noise was a thing that became part of the podcast, I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, people are walking up to each other, with a cheap mic and they're going, hey, how'd you get your start? How'd you do this? And they're throwing that mic. So I think it's a great format. even though they're planned beforehand, just to let you guys know, that's not someone walking up. Because if you notice, the person being interviewed has a mic on their, on their lapel. So like, if you're like, yeah, he just walked out of his Rolls Royce looking like $1 million, some kid on the street who he's never met before walks up with an object in his hand, and he's just going to sit there and listen. No, it's been planned, but it's still entertaining. If I promise you, all the guys that I know who are like that, if someone walks up to them with an object in their hand outstretched over their head, someone's getting on the ground.
Yeah, I agree. All right. For anybody who has been listening to this and is smart enough to know they want to connect with you more, they've got a deal, they want to learn more of your insight and wisdom, like what's the best way for them to get connected with you, understanding that this is neither legal, financial, or tax advice, and this is your opinion, not the opinion of any agency or organization, and disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer.
After all those disclaimers, if you still want to chat, you can go to my LinkedIn, Joshua Bruce Wilson. You can find me on the Deal Scout. Those are easy ways to connect with me and be like, hey, I heard you and Jordan talking and I'd like to connect. So that's probably the easiest way.
I hope after hearing the disclaimers, they want to connect with you more. Because I probably should disclaim legal stuff, but I don't.
Yeah.
So you
I
are
just got off the phone with
responsible.
my compliance department and I might have a new disclaimer on top of that disclaimer shortly. So stay tuned for the next disclaimer.
Insert extra disclaimers here if you send them to us afterwards. No, cool. All right. So normally I did this a little bit, order a little different because next week I have Joshua Pies, a different Josh, on. We're talking about the same topic. We are going back to back. Josh runs the Bootstrapped Unicorn podcast and also builds podcasts out for other people to help them with all these packages where they can get together with guests, with not, put the stuff together. So I really wanted intentionally to do back-to-back podcast, and I'm hoping to then you all listen to this on February 4th. So Josh Pies' episode will be next February 11th. So by then, I hope to also have a free download or a cheap download for you that gives you our entire podcast SOP to give you one less opportunity to complain about why you cannot, in fact, have a podcast to grow your personal brand and run a business you can be proud of and live a life that's even better. That'll be next week. That being said, send us away. Josh, what's the biggest takeaway? What's the last nugget of wisdom? What's the if they do nothing else but this, they should.
If they do nothing else but this, they should pay attention to, I think, what your core message as a coach is how do you simplify? How do you bring more joy? How do you reduce that kind of stress load in your life? I tell you, the dollar isn't worth it. Invest the money to decrease, buy back your time, like Dan says, buy back your time, buy back your life, and then chase the things in life that are worth capturing, right? So I would say, and if you don't have a coach, invest in a coach. You are never, ever, ever going to get better unless you have a coach. That's it.
I love it. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everybody who watched and listened. We'll see you back here next week for, I'm going to say other Josh, but when on his podcast, you're going to be other Josh. I just want you to be aware. And I'll also see you on Friday with a newsletter about what an ideal year looks like. In the meantime, have a great week.